The following is a presentation of the Broadband Universe, brought to you in part by Vitruvi, the end-to-end GIS-based construction management platform that connects asset owners, operators, general contractors, and subcontractors for unmatched project control and collaboration. Manage every aspect of your telecommunications or utility infrastructure construction program with Vitruvi. Build faster, reduce costs, improve quality. Book your demo today on vitruvisoftware.com to see how we can help you build at scale. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Broadband Universe podcast. I'm Craig Corbin. It is a distinct pleasure and privilege to introduce our guest today, the CEO of NTCA, Shirley Bloomfield. Shirley, welcome to the Broadband Universe.
Craig, it is a delight to be with you. I always appreciate the topics that you cover, so I'm excited to be here today.
It is such an exciting time in the world of broadband and so much of what is going on with the NTCA. But before we get into that and calendar events coming up, very big one for NTCA, get us sort of a 30,000-foot overview of how Shirley Bloomfield wound up at NTCA.
Oh, the 30,000-foot level. Well, I will share that I had worked many decades ago up on Capitol Hill and really focused on funding. I worked for the House Budget Committee in my last role and was approached to actually come and represent rural telephone providers at that time. And I thought, well, I know how to dial a telephone, so how hard can this be? And actually happened to come into this industry and working for NTCA at a time right before things took off, had the chance to work on the 96 Telecom Act. Now having been able to culminate that with working on the infrastructure legislation that was signed into law last fall, kind of feel like I have seen this whole trajectory as we've kind of gone from telephone to broadband to who knows what's next. But it's been an exciting ride.
No doubt about it. That's an understatement and a perfect segue into looking at exactly the mission of NTCA. And I know that there is so much importance placed on serving rural America. Talk about that.
So we really focus, it's interesting, when I was thinking about our discussion today, it really fit in perfectly to the mission of NTCA, which is really focused on working on behalf of rural broadband providers who are working to build a better broadband future for rural America, and how all of that is just coming together with all of the initiatives, whether they're state or whether they're federal, focused on what it's going to take to actually connect all Americans.
Yeah, we talk about serving rural America, and there are many misconceptions, I think. People assume that everything is done with wireless connectivity, but that is not the case. A very small percentage of connectivity is that. Talk about it, that component as well.
Sure. Well, and I would even start a step further back, Craig, and say that the misconception also about rural America is that it is completely unconnected. And I look at, the areas that my company serve. We've got 850 community-based providers across the country, 35% of the landmass. Over 75% of their customers have access to fiber to the home technology. That is astounding. And they were early adopters because they knew it. They knew they needed to get that robust connectivity. And they knew that the rural communities really depended on that. So I see that as the first kind of misconception, that people think that there's, plastic cups and tin, wire running around out there. The other thing about wireless is, my folks are going as quickly as they can to put fiber technology into the ground. And that is because not only have they known that that's a future-proof technology, but if we haven't learned over the past 2.5 years, the needs, the capacity, the speed, the synchronous upload, download, that we really need to be able to kind of continue as an economy, then we haven't learned the lessons that we should have. So wireless has its role. I completely believe that having backup technology, they're complementary to one another. But I think to relegate rural America to a wireless future only really puts them in second-class communication status.
Something you just mentioned, I would consider to be a silver lining, if you can find one, in what we've gone through in the last 2.5 years, and that is the ability to depend upon the infrastructure that is in place to have served in a far greater capacity than before the pandemic. Talk about that if you would.
It is so fascinating. We get to see this from not only an entity that, represents broadband providers, but we also provide healthcare benefits. So watching telemedicine initiatives during COVID was just astounding. We saw it from our own program, Teledoc, that we help administer. And watching people being able, a little nervous, but being able to adapt technology to make their lives easier was profound. And I look at the schools, you had rural schools that quickly pivoted to online activity, and watching the carriers that I represent literally working to connect those students at home within a week of school shutting down, and then thinking about how does that change education going forward? What are the ways we can use those technology and those tools? So I think that we've seen kind of I don't think we'll ever go back on some things. I think we'll edge a little bit further back to where we are. Yeah, I'll go to the doctor instead of, this or that. But not always, maybe it's a strep throat, and maybe I can do that from the comfort of my home when I'm feeling kind of crummy. So I think that we have learned a lot, and you're right, it is a silver lining of sorts.
No doubt. And when we look at this transformative time, and entering what I have referred to in many conversations as the golden age of broadband, with all that is happening now and the growth and funding, etc. But give us a State of the Union overview, if you would, for the NTCA and its membership as a whole.
So again, one of the things I've always loved about the folks that we represent at NTCA is because they're community-based, they've always been focused on what is service, what does my community need to take us into the 21st century? Where can I connect with my local governance or my local service providers or my anchor institutions? So that's always been kind of a core. So I look at this time right now, and I love that your terminology of the golden age. We've known how important connectivity is. Now everybody knows how important connectivity is. So you've got this infusion, whether it is federal support, whether it's state support, whether it is partnerships between providers and communities, whether it's between providers and providers, whether it's between a rural utility along with a broadband entity. I think it is a really interesting time to take a very serious moment and say, who's unconnected? Who does not have any connectivity at all? Who's got unacceptable connectivity? Because I think that's the other piece, is that we've learned what really is acceptable. And even having the chairwoman of the FCC come out recently and say, you know what, 25.3, no. We really need to do better than that. And that is where I look at my companies, and they are working 24/7, and I do mean 24/7, to build as quickly as they can and to reach as many people as they can. And what I'm seeing is they're now edging out beyond their traditional boundaries pretty aggressively, because they neighbor a number of unserved and underserved communities. So now, while they've taken care of their areas, they're saying, okay, who's next? I have people telling me how, they'll be having their broadband and their fiber, labeled trucks coming down the road, and people will stop them and say, when are you coming? When are you building? So I think folks are that anxious to get the job done.
No question. You're watching the Broadband Universe podcast, brought to you in part by Lit Communities. Light up your community. You deserve better internet. By Vetro FiberMap, radically simpler fiber management. By OnTrack, a proven leader in connectivity. And by Vitruvi, built faster, reduce costs, and improve quality. Guest today, the CEO of NTCA, Shirley Bloomfield, and one of the topics that has been at the forefront in many conversations has been, with all the funding that's going on and the building of systems and networks, there's an issue with the manpower to handle that. One of the things that I noticed recently is the involvement in the Talent Pipeline Challenge. Talk about that.
So we were very excited. We, again, starting back from the time of putting the Infrastructure Act together, really worked closely with a number of folks, the White House, the rural community, a lot of the agencies. So we were very delighted to be given a seat at the table in June when the White House held a meeting to basically say, okay, infrastructure, we're going to go do it. Now, how do we get this done? It was led by Mitch Landrieu, who is the kind of infrastructure czar. So that kind of followed up on that whole challenge of like, all right, what is it going to take? And One of the things that struck me, Craig, in that discussion was there was a lot of talk about some initiatives that were taking place. You know, what AT&T was doing with Corning, some other kind of local initiatives, but none of them were rural. All of them were focused on a more urban kind of pressing need. So I was able to reach out to some of the folks on the National Economic Council and say, you know what, don't forget about rural. Demographics are very different. What it takes to train a workforce, what it takes to retain a workforce. You've got to get into a different mindset. So we were invited to participate in this challenge, and NTCA last week submitted 3 different proposals that we have put forward to the White House. First, we've created a nationwide partnership with Northwood Technical College up in Wisconsin that runs a broadband academy. They have put about 500 graduates out into the world, thinking through how we can offer that online training with a in-person component locally for folks to train that workforce. Second of all, we're working with the National Rural Education Association to create a K through 12 awareness program, because broadband jobs are cool. They are.
Yes.
But you know, you're an 8th grader, you're thinking about what you want to do, you're a 10th grader, you're not thinking necessarily, you may be thinking tech, you're not thinking about broadband.
Yeah.
So how can we work together with the National Association that works with rural schools to think about what that kind of exposure could be, what kind of those in classroom exposures, those, you know, hands-on, those field trips, all of those kinds of things. And the last is a partnership with CWA for those of our member companies that are CWA shops to do a OSHA training program, online safety program, that will be able to kind of tally and recognize those folks who actually go through that specific training. So 3 different buckets, but I think each one kind of fills a need that we see out there.
No question. And what's exciting, Shirley, is that there is such an immediate need to have the talent that you're talking about with respect to the training opportunities, and what a fulfilling career path for so many people. And I don't think there's going to be any shortage of opportunities in the next decade. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And the thing that I would also say is a little bit different, having had my experience where I've worked with small providers forever, but I also had a stint with both Verizon and Qwest, is the difference with these community-based providers is you can start being outside plant, you can start being operations, you can start being the cybersecurity tech, you can become the CEO. The path is amazing with these smaller companies, and the ability to kind of get your hands in every part of the operation are unlike things you would find in a large corporation. So I also think of the fact that, you know, there's no limit to what folks can do if they're willing to work for these small community-based companies.
Without question. One of the things that I wanted to get to in our conversation today is a big event on the NTCA calendar, and that is the Fall Conference coming up just a couple of days, quite honestly, at the to be held at the Marriott Marquis, San Francisco. What a phenomenal setting for that, and an opportunity for members to get updated on what's happening with regulatory issues, look at strategies. Talk about the Fall Conference, if you would.
We are so excited, Craig. So this program is just coming together, and I think it's coming together at the perfect time. For example, we have on our opening session, you know, we're going to be focused on broadband funding and opportunities and mapping and cybersecurity and looking into the future and all of those things that I think are so top of mind and should be so top of mind. But we do have Evan Feynman, who is head of the director of the BEAD program at NTIA, will be joining us. Trent Hardiker, who is the head of the Wireline Competition Bureau at the FCC, will be coming to join us at a time when we're talking about the future of universal service and how it's going to help make all of this new network affordable in these high-cost areas. And I just got a call from USDA today that one of their undersecretaries is looking to come spend some time with us as well to talk about the Reconnect program. So when I think about the trifecta of all of these resources coming together, and then we're going to have a focus on what's going on in the states, because this is a whole new ball game with the states actually going to take the lead to distribute all of this BEAD funding. So what is that relationship between NTIA and these states? Where are the states in their plans? Where are they with their mapping? How will that jive with the FCC mapping? How will that jive with what NTIA does? So many questions. So this is a perfect time for us to gather, to have these conversations, to hear what people are doing in the field, and then kind of reset to say, all right, 2023, here we come.
No doubt. And you mentioned a couple of things. We can talk about data mapping for an entire episode, so we'll save that. But to your point with respect to what the states are doing, notice something recently that in the Tar Heel State, I'm a native North Carolinian, so very pleased to see, I think, a substantial grant of $26 million focused broadband. Talk about that if you would.
So how exciting. So there's certain states that have really kind of rocked what they are doing on the state front. And I certainly put North Carolina in that class. And, I look at a company like Focus Broadband, used to be ATMC Cooperative out there in Charlotte. They have been so on the ball thinking about where are those unserved, where are those underserved, and they have very surgically, whether through Reconnect, whether some other grants, and now using the North Carolina program, really, really closing the gap. And they are building fiber all the way. And they have really done it under the umbrella of being a smart rural community. They were one of our very first companies that kind of got into our smart rural community program and said, you know what, to be a smart rural community, you've got to be powered by, fiber broadband. So here we go. So they continue to really impress me in terms of the work they are doing. They have not slowed down. And I think this grant has been also a great example of a partnership between the broadband provider and I think in this last grant, at least 4 or 5 different communities. So they are working with these community leaders. They are saying, where is your need? What can we do? And they are collaborating together to get that funding and to deploy to the constituents in those communities. So I think it's a really exciting thing to watch. And, I think some other states will also be following suit.
As we begin to wrap up, so much of what is done with NTCA is the advocacy, and obviously you were in the nation's capital, so much that goes on there. You made mention earlier on about your background in working there in the capital. As we wrap up the conversation, talk about the importance of having the opportunity to meet with the leaders that are making such momentous decisions that will directly affect the future of the NTCA members.
So, Craig, I am the world's biggest fan of grassroots advocacy. I think there is nothing more powerful than when local leaders, local broadband providers share with their policymakers, their congressmen, their senators, their local and state leaders, what is happening on the ground. And that, I think, has been the game changer, to really talk about the fact that, look, we've built to this community, but we've got this community over here, and this is some of their needs, or this is an anchor institution that would really benefit from some, the ability for us to connect them to the world. So we have relied very heavily on our members telling their own story. And that, to me, is the game changer. It's constituents serving constituents, serving folks on the ground in the local communities. And I think the power of telling that story is so much more impactful than me throwing a bunch of national statistics out there or me throwing a national map. People want to know how it affects the lives of the people they know and they represent. And that has been the difference. I would love nothing more than to get President Biden out into the field, into rural America, so we can show him some of the exciting things that are taking place. But certainly are looking forward to potentially an opportunity in the days ahead.
Absolutely. Well, so much phenomenal work being done by you and the staff at NTCA. Thank you so much for joining us here today, talking about so much that's going on. Look forward to catching up with you again, perhaps prior to the big event on the calendar in February, San Diego, and our time.
We would be delighted, and I think by February, think about it. We'll have a better sense of where the mapping lies. We'll have a better sense of where the NOFO with NTIA lies. I think people will have a better sense of what's going on in the supply chain challenges and the workforce challenges. So there will be a lot to talk about in February as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And again, for what you and the staff there do. And we look forward to the next visit. On behalf of Shirley, I'm Craig. Thanks so much for letting us be a part of your day. We'll see you next time right here on the Broadband Universe. So long, everyone.